Well, good evening, East Alabama to West Georgia. Dr. Don back in here with you. It is Thursday, September 26, 2024, coming up on 7:30 Central, 8:30 over on the eastern side of the time zone, and we are broadcasting live this evening from the White County, Georgia Emergency Operations Center. As those of you who know me know that that's my daytime job. And I am the Deputy Director of the Emergency Management Agency and Chief over the 911 Division and Animal Control. So long night ahead of us here in White County, Georgia. But the folks here in White County gracious enough to allow me to spend time with you guys across East Alabama, West Georgia, South Georgia, to kind of bring you up to date on what's going on with the weather situation. And I think I have that horrible echo fixed now, and I apologize for that from our. Yep, I just had to check it right quick. From our last broadcast, we had an echo in there, and I apologize. The reason we keep having trouble with our audio, it's almost impossible to monitor the live feed because there's about a 10-second delay there. So it's really hard to monitor that and talk at the same time. So sometimes we have audio issues and we just don't know it until we finish our broadcast, and I apologize for that. But I believe we have it straightened out. So here's the deal. As we head into the event, it is go time now across the state of Georgia and East Alabama. I think we're looking at a Category 4 hurricane at landfall in the Big Bend area of the state of Florida. I think we're looking at a historical event. I think this is going to end up being the largest and fastest moving hurricane the Big Bend area of the state of Florida has ever seen. It's beginning to look like that is going to affect a large portion of the state of Georgia, and the National Weather Service has extended the hurricane warnings all the way up into South Atlanta for winds above hurricane force strength, gusting. Now, we're not talking about sustained winds of hurricane force, but certainly gust above 73 miles per hour will be possible in and around Atlanta. And I think if you draw a line from Tallahassee, Florida to Albany, Georgia, up to Atlanta and to the east is most likely where the absolute worst weather is going to be as we go through the overnight hours with Hurricane Helene. West of that, back across West Georgia and East Alabama, there's certainly going to be effects from this storm. And there will be gusty winds, 25, 30, 35, maybe even 40 miles per hour. And a gust occasionally above 40 can't be completely ruled out, especially in West Georgia. So there will be some scattered power outage issues across East Alabama and West Georgia. The easternmost tier of counties in Alabama under a tropical storm warning. All of West Georgia also under a tropical storm warning and a flood watch. If you go back west of that easternmost tier of counties in Alabama, we're talking about Tallapoosa up to Clay County, Calhoun, back over toward Talladega, and into the Birmingham area, you are under a wind advisory for gusty winds 15, 20, 25 miles per hour. So we could see some scattered power outages across East Alabama, and the further west you go, back toward the track of the storm, the greater that chance is going to be for those scattered power outages. And then when you get along the track of the storm, and to the right of that is where the absolute worst wind and rain is going to be. And we could be looking at extensive power outages that will last for a very long period of time. Now, up here in northeast Georgia, we're advising our residents to be prepared to shelter in place for up to 36 hours. If you lose power, we're asking folks to stay at home. Don't get out on the roadways because utility crews and responders are trying to get out there and get your life back to normal as soon as possible. And the last thing we need is for folks to be riding around, taking a look at what's going on, and getting in the way of those first responders. So please respect that, and do everything you can to stay off of the roadways once we get into the height of this thing. Now, let me back up to East Alabama. I think the height of the wind, whatever that ends up being in East Alabama, I think the height of that is going to be after 3 a.m. tomorrow morning, and that will probably last through about 9 or 10 a.m. tomorrow morning, and then the winds are going to ease up, and by tomorrow afternoon, we may have sunshine across East Alabama and West Georgia. You get into West Georgia, back toward Atlanta, I think the timing is the same. It starts after about 3 a.m. in the morning. And then up in northeast Georgia, I think we're looking at about 6 a.m. When we start to get into the height of the highest wind gust. And that's not to say that we can't have some wind gust prior to that time. I'm talking about the period of time where the eye wall of the storm is at its closest approach to White County for about 4, 5, 6 hours there. That's when we will see the most consistent wind gust, and that could be 60, 70, maybe even 80 miles per hour up on the ridge tops across the northeast Georgia mountains. So I would hope that everybody will take heed to that up here in northeast Georgia and understand that at least along the southern Appalachian chain in northern Georgia, this could very well end up being another Irma. And you'll remember Irma from 2017. We had widespread tree damage. We had widespread utility damage, and we went multiple days without power up here in northeast Georgia and all across North Georgia. So I think we're looking at something very similar here. At least that will be the opportunity. We hope it doesn't happen. And there is an outside chance this could be a bust, and it doesn't happen. That's what we always hope for. But understand, odds are pretty good that most of you in northern Georgia watching me this evening are likely going to be in the dark at some point before this thing is said and done. Tornado threat, really, it's not zero, but it's a pretty low tornado threat, especially in East Alabama and across West Georgia and across the entire state of Georgia for the most part. Now, we have seen a handful of tornado warnings in the last hour. We've had a couple down there in Dougherty County, down around Albany. We saw a few tornado warnings earlier back close to the Savannah area, south of Savannah, north of Jacksonville, and then up into South Carolina. I actually think the tornado threat's going to be more significant in South Carolina than it will be in Georgia. But we cannot rule out the possibility of a quick spin-up tornado anywhere across East Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina. And understand these are quick spin-up tornadoes. They're very small in nature. They don't last very long at all. And the warning on all of this is what's referred to as a short-fused warning, which means that the Weather Service just doesn't have a lot of time. You're not going to get that 10, 15, 20-minute lead time on these warnings. When you hear a tornado warning issued for your area, take it seriously and take cover immediately because it could be right there on top of you. I want to show you the radar as we have it right now. We were going to switch over. There we go. And you can see what's going on across, and I'll zoom out and give you a wide shot here. And you can see what's happening across the southeastern United States. I know all those watches and warnings kind of clutters up the screen a little bit, but so our Category 4 hurricane, Helene, is still out in the Gulf of Mexico. It is about 400 miles south of Atlanta, Georgia, continuing off to the north-northeast at about 23 miles per hour, which is relatively fast for a hurricane. And that's why we're expecting hurricane force winds to extend so far north up into Georgia, almost into the Atlanta area, because of the forward speed, moving at 23 miles per hour. It just doesn't have time to weaken very much before it punches that far inland. So we could see significant winds in places like Valdosta, Albany, Douglas, Georgia, Americus, Macon, down there at the fairgrounds in Perry, all the way up to around Griffin and maybe McDonough there on the south side of Atlanta could see hurricane strength winds before this is all said and done. And then that wind we'll lose some of it, but when it gets up into northeast Georgia, it's going to interact with the southern Appalachians. And what happens there is especially in the higher elevations, you get up higher in elevation, you get up into the wind. So, at 15,000 feet and above, you could be looking, or 1,500 feet and above, I should say. You'll be up there a little higher, so you're going to be closer to where that really strong wind is located. Well, Cleveland, Georgia sits at about 1,500 feet. And then if you get up on top of Unicoi Gap or Blood Mountain, you're getting up there around 2,500, 3,000 feet. So you can see what happens when you get a little bit higher. You get into that bigger wind. So the ridge tops across the mountain range probably would most likely be the areas that would experience the 80-mile-per-hour winds. And then down in most of the area across northeast Georgia would probably experience 50, 60, maybe occasional gust at 70. But, folks, with all the rain that we have had in the last 48 hours, that will certainly be enough wind to bring down numerous trees, and we could be looking at widespread power outages for an extended period of time up here in northeast Georgia. So let's take you down to street level and take a look at East Alabama, show you what's going on with the radar right now. And you can see that we've got some heavy rain moving through Troup County. I mean, that's probably some pretty gusty winds taking place right there in LaGrange. And anytime you see yellows and reds in this type of environment, that is copious amount of rain falling at one time. This is blinding rainfall. I mean, we're talking rainfall rates probably approaching 2 inches per hour there. So it doesn't take but one or two of these and you start having flood problems. Just this one feeder band that's coming through Troup County, through Lynette, through Valley, stretching down into Lee County could certainly cause some street-level flash flooding and could also lead to some river and creek flooding as well. That is moving back up to the north and northwest, so that's probably going to be the first round of significant rain moving up into Randolph County. So you folks over there on the southeast corner of Randolph, talking about Rock Mills, back over toward Roanoke, and then up the eastern side of Randolph County, up County Road 87, you got some very heavy rainfall headed your way, and this will be the first of many waves of very heavy rainfall that we will experience across East Alabama and West Georgia tonight. And when I zoom back out, you can see that there are multiple rounds of this on the way. I mean, look at this spiral band coming through Americus, Georgia. That's going to rotate up toward Columbus and eventually end up in East Alabama and West Georgia as well. Very heavy rainfall up around Peachtree City, right along the I-85 corridor, really from Tuskegee through Auburn, Valley, LaGrange, and up through Union City and Atlanta. Extremely heavy rainfall falling right now. And then for northeast Georgia, you folks watching us up here in Cleveland, hello Cleveland Fire. I know you're tuned in this evening. Right now, mostly light rain, but if you look to the south along the I-20 and the I-85 corridor, we're beginning to see some of those yellows and reds fill in, and all of that's going to rotate up toward White County, Georgia, back over toward Dahlonega and Lumpkin County, also Stevens County up at Toccoa, and Banks County, Habersham County. We know that we have a swiftwater rescue already underway up there in Rabun County this evening. So it's going to be a long night, I'm afraid, and it looks like that flooding will be an issue in this part of the country, as well as high winds, power outages. And again, I think in northeast Georgia, we're probably looking at the height of this thing after 6 a.m. Tomorrow morning and probably lasting through noon, maybe 1 or 2 p.m. before the winds really start to subside. Understand all across East Alabama, West Georgia, Northeast Georgia. It's not going to be blowing that hard constantly for that length of time. We're talking about gust. Your sustained winds will probably stay in the 15, 20 mile per hour category. And then here comes a feeder band, and we start to get those gusts. And those thunderstorms, and that heavy rain is what pushes that wind to the ground. So that's the way we think this thing is going to play out as we go through the remainder of this evening. A couple of things I want to touch on right quick, and then we're going to wrap this up. We're going to do a live over on our White County Public Safety Facebook page here in probably the top of the hour, so in about 15 minutes. If you want to follow us, regardless of where you are, just go to Facebook and search for White County Public Safety, and we'll be live over there in a few minutes, and we'll talk more specifically about what we think will happen up here in White County as we go throughout the evening. But folks, and this will apply to you regardless of where you are, be real careful about calling 911. Please reserve those phone calls to 911 for true emergencies. Don't call 911 to ask about road conditions, weather information. You want to try to call 911 if you actually have an emergency. You got to understand that those guys and gals do amazing things, but when the weather turns bad and we start losing trees and power lines and we have emergencies we have to deal with, there are not a lot of them in that room, and they get overwhelmed very quickly. So try to be mindful of that. Be careful as to why you call 911. If you have an emergency, absolutely dial 911. But if you need 911 for a non-emergency information of any kind, you want to Google your 911 center and get their non-emergency number and use that number instead of actually dialing 911. Be patient with us up here in White County, regardless of where you are. Be patient with your first responders, especially if things go south quickly. They get overwhelmed just like 911 does. They have to prioritize the calls, and they will go to the most serious calls first, and they will get to you as soon as they possibly can. But it may take a minute, especially once we get into the height of this storm later on tonight and early tomorrow morning up here in the northeast Georgia mountains. Stay home. Just ride the storm out at home, especially in northeast Georgia. We're asking our citizens to prepare for the possibility of sheltering in place for 36 hours or more. If you lose power, it may be that long before you get power back. Just be prepared for that. And of course, all readiness, preparedness should have already been completed by now. So I hope that everybody's hunkered down and will stay safe inside your home. Don't get out on the roads. That just simply hampers rescue, and it hampers utility efforts to get your power restored and get you back to normal conditions as soon as we possibly can. Be safe out there. We will continue to update you throughout the night here on Dr. Don's Weather. And again, we'll have updates over on our White County Public Safety page on Facebook. We're going to do a live at the top of the hour, and we'll be continuing to do those throughout the evening as well. Thank you for joining us here on Dr. Don's Weather. And we'll see you back in here shortly with another update from Dr. Don's Weather.